All right, thank you very much. Yes, absolutely. I'll pull mine a little closer. Thank you very much. And as it is 7 o'clock, I will call to order the Special Planning Advisory Committee meeting for the Town of St. Andrews Planning Advisory Committee. So we have in front of us, record of attendance, excuse me. I notice everyone is here with us today except for Vice Chair Cross. And special welcome to Xander, who is in the room today. So we have agenda in front of us. If everyone's had a chance to review, if there could be a motion on the approval of the agenda. Councillor Harlan, thanks. Is there a seconder? Mr. Kerr, thank you very much. And just before any discussion, we're thinking that we might just flip the agenda a little bit and move the presentation for the proposed bylaw into the second space as opposed to and we'll move the zoning application for the Cannabis Express up. If that is amenable, I would entertain an amended motion on the agenda. Thank you very much. Is there a seconder? Thank you very much. And thanks very much for allowing that amendment. All those in favor of the agenda, please signify by saying aye. Aye. There being none opposed, we will move forward with that. And as we begin, we would like to recognize that we are on the unceded traditional territory of the Peskotomuhkati people. And is there any declarations of conflict of interest on tonight's agenda? There being none, we will move ahead. We have confirmation of minutes. Everyone's had a chance to review the minutes in their package. There's anyone that would like to make a motion to adopt those minutes? Thank you very much, Mr. Kerr. Is there a seconder? Thanks, Mr. Tanner. Excellent. There's no discussion or questions on the minutes. I will call the question. All those in favor of adopting the minutes from October 18th, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? There being none, those minutes are adopted. So we will move ahead in the agenda. We have item number PAC 231107. This is an application for compatible use for a Cannabis Express store at 218 Water Street, PID 151-63918. Christopher Jones is the applicant. He would like to run his business Cannabis Express out of 218 Water Street, and the applicant is seeking a compatible use or similar to be compared with the liquor store. And we have a planning report, and Mr. Gopin would be so kind as to take us through.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Paul's got the presentation up there. I'll do the next slide. So 218 Water Street, they're calling it Suite C in the back. Cannabis Express, use similar to or compatible with variants. Okay, sorry, what was I got? Probably fairly well known that St. Andrews has been chosen by the provincial Cannabis New Brunswick agency for a private license. They chose, I think, 10 smaller municipalities. And there's all sorts of relevant provincial, federal acts and regulations relating to private sales of cannabis in the province that are other people's jobs to deal with, namely the Department of Justice and Public Safety. One of the things they need from the applicant is zoning confirmation. So basically saying that this can happen in this zone. And it's not clearly allowed in the zone. It's not explicitly prohibited. Some things are clearly prohibited. Adult entertainment uses, that's very clearly prohibited. There's some other things, but this is not clearly prohibited. So they made an application for a use similar to or compatible with another use in the zone. Seemed like a liquor store was the closest comparison. And it would be in the rear portion of the Kennedy House at 218 Water Street. I've got a diagram on the next slide, or an aerial view, so it'd be in the back there. And you can go to the next slide. So this is what I asked for, can you give us some examples of the signage and the exterior concepts that you'd be using? And this was what the applicant submitted. So on the next slide, we're going to do a little bit of a detour because this is a new piece of provincial legislation that has come into effect at the end of October, and it needs to be considered in all planning decisions. And we'll do a bigger, more extensive training on this when we have time, but we didn't have time before here, so I do want to bring them to your attention a little bit. These identify, oftentimes planners say, we try and work in the public interest, but that's a bit of a nebulous, vague thing. So the province has finally, after a long time of planners asking, said, okay, we're going to define what the public interest is. And these set priorities for land use planning and align provincial, local, and regional land use across New Brunswick. All planning decisions, including variances, are supposed to conform to these statements of interest, and they cover a few key areas: settlement patterns, agriculture, climate change, flood and natural hazard areas, and natural resource development. And the ones that are really relevant for most development in the downtown of St. Andrews are going to be the settlement patterns. And the one that I think is the most relevant is promoting and prioritizing development in areas of communities with existing or planned public infrastructure and services. And they list ways to do this. These are also things that will need to be incorporated into bylaws moving forward. So municipal plans. I think the ones that are in place currently in the town would be pretty close to aligning with these because these are best planning principles. But in regards to settlement patterns, and I think relevant for tonight's application and included in the report, the idea of providing opportunities for adaptive reuse of buildings and providing opportunity for innovative and or compact building design where services are provided. And this is a serviced downtown area that we're talking about. So after we look at the provincial regulations, we look at other municipal regulations. And the municipal plan does deal with cannabis retail. And basically it says council shall monitor and, if deemed necessary, regulate cannabis retail stores. And the way that that has been interpreted is that this is about the expansion, the proliferation of cannabis retail. And council was made aware of the store, of a single one. And we can go to the next slide, actually. I wasn't at this meeting, but I believe there was a meeting where council discussed this, and they had some concerns over the signage. And we have a condition relating to that, but that was the extent of council's desire to regulate at this time. And there may be ways to regulate further in the future, but at this time, nothing else was put into a municipal plan, zoning bylaw, so we move forward with the legislation that we have. So other external consultation. I did talk with the building inspector in our office, and while you might not think that adding a new business in an existing structure would necessitate a building permit, because you're adding a new use or a different type of occupancy under code, this use will require a building permit. And there are some issues with that building. It is an older building. So the applicant has been advised to discuss fire safety plans with the building inspector, because we will need to issue a building permit, and we can't do that unless first it's got to meet zoning, which one of the reasons we're here tonight, and it also has to meet code. I also consulted with the municipality of Grand Bay Westfield. There is a Cannabis Xpress operating in that municipality already. I spoke with one of their development officers. They said it was an allowed use in their central commercial zone. They make it a use subject to terms and conditions. So it would still have to go to their planning advisory committee, but it's a little bit of a different situation where they just say, set some conditions for it. It is an allowed use. And this committee has seen those before. And I asked, have there been any issues with this use? And he said, nope, nothing, absolutely nothing has come up. It's been smooth sailing. So that's been the experience in Grand Bay Westfield with the same operator. We did 100-meter mail out, and I think it got a little further than that. So there's a stack of letters that you've received. They mostly deal with concerns over the type of business, over the location of the business, concerns over compliance with other bylaws in the town, and the idea of a slippery slope. So if you let this in, then what happens? We can go to the next slide. So when you look at the statements of public interest and the municipal plan, there's other policies in the municipal plan around locating retail in the central commercial zone, which is aligns with the statements of public interest. And then you have the council regulating if necessary. It seems to direct this use to the central commercial zone. And while this is a fairly new landscape in New Brunswick, when you look across the private retailers operating, they seem to largely be in commercial zones in other municipalities. And it's important to remember that this application is about land use. There can be other issues with bylaws that will need to be addressed before a permit is issued. And there are code issues that need to be addressed before a permit is issued. But really what PAC is here tonight, your authority is, do you consider this use similar to or compatible with another one in the zone? And because there was a desire from council to see a little bit of control over the signage, I think there was a discussion with the applicant and they agreed not to use the marijuana leaf on the sign, which I believe was the desire of council. We did look at the secondary plan for best practices around signage. There's no requirements. But the zoning bylaw regulates signs pretty extensively, and there would be a specific permit required for any signs. And in the future, again, if council sees the need to regulate these, there's a municipal plan and zoning bylaw update that's starting to get underway. So it's not a bad time to think about that. And is this the kind of thing where, do you want to see more of it? Do you close the door after this? Assuming if PAC approves it, but that decision around future proliferation is really up to council. And PAC is deciding on the specific one tonight.
Can I just add, as well, PAC, just to note, Cannabis New Brunswick regulates these, and they're the ones who issue the licenses. So in different provinces, there's different formats of how these operate. Nova Scotia has them operating within the liquor stores. New Brunswick has separate box stores, and now these permits, Ontario and Alberta, private licenses, basically. So there are different structures around, but I just wanted to let you know that they are highly regulated by the provincial processes.
So still talking about the province, in terms of planning decisions, we're looking at the Community Planning Act and the legal authority of PAC to make this decision. So subject to terms and conditions that you see fit, you may permit a proposed use of land or building that is otherwise not permitted in the zoning bylaw if, in your opinion, the proposed use is sufficiently similar to or compatible with a use permitted in the bylaw for the zone in which the land or building is situated. And finally, the recommendation, if approved, there is a condition around signage before it is installed. Sign permit application is submitted and that any signs are appropriate to the character of the historic business district, made of durable and traditional materials or adequate facsimiles in the opinion of the development officer. So at this point, PAC, obviously you have your process, you can ask questions, public portion, but when it comes time to make a motion, you can make a motion to approve the use variance and accept staff recommendation for conditions. You can approve the variance with modified or additional conditions. You can table the application for more information, important to specify what information you're looking for. Or you can motion to reject the variance, and it's important to give reasoning as to why the use is not similar to or compatible with other uses allowed in the central commercial zone. I will leave it there, and I think I'm happy to answer any questions at this time.
Thank you very much. Over to the committee. Do we have any questions for Xander?
Xander,
Yes.
has parking ever been brought up as an issue? Because I mean, there's already limited parking in there. I understand. I know that they rent 5 extra spaces for the other building, like we had talked before. How would you see dedicated parking with traffic going in and out with our one-way street in the summer. That's one of my main concerns, right? Because increased traffic, it's already a blind zone. Right? You already got a nose out there super slow to get out there on that sidewalk anyways. Like, how many cars are gonna go in there and realize there's zero parking and come back out? It's one of my biggest concerns. The first person that gets runs over, I'm gonna have a big issue, right? Like, I mean,
Right. So I guess there's two things to consider. One is, how does this use impact that more than other uses in that zone? So if you had another business opening there and it was like selling, I don't know, crafts or something, would it be a similar impact? And two, the zoning bylaw for the historic business district does not require parking for retail uses, so it exempts that use. And parking is an issue. I know that. And it's something the town has been working on and is looking for dedicated solutions. Would this add significant traffic? I doubt it. There are other parking lots around. You know, it's not going to be a huge store, so, but you might have one or two more cars like poking in and poking out.
so in regards, we had a discussion before where the building owner, Paul, you might be able to answer this. The building owner and the adjacent property owner, which we have a letter from him, they had talked about possibly building a fence if it goes through. Would that fence close off all traffic coming from the back of the building, i.e. parking in town parking lots and then coming through? Or would all traffic for that location come from Water Street?
So through you, Madam Chair, currently right now, there's no other access to get in and out through the parking lot other than the main entry point that's off of Water Street. There's propane tanks, there's barriers already there between both the municipal parking lot, the adjacent owners and the Kennedy. So there's already barriers to that. So really the only in and out that's currently there is the Water Street access.
But walking traffic can come in around there quite easy. That's all I'm saying. Would
Currently
you-
walking traffic, yes. If people wanted to walk in and around into the back of the Kennedy, they could at this point.
Yes,
But if a fence is put up, the answer would be no, unless there's a gate or something. But from my understanding, there has been no discussion on a gate access. So walking traffic would still have to come from the main part of Water Street. They would have to walk in from a sidewalk down that area.
so the discussion between the two adjacent property owners is that they'll seal the whole thing off with the fence. The fence would come and it essentially attached to the Kennedy house.
From-
Then that would close that back end off.
Correct. From my understanding, the discussions that I've had with the property owner, the goal was to fence it. There was no discussion of a gate or to continue public access through.
Okay.
Anyone else have any questions for Mr. Gulpin? Yes, Councillor Harland.
So, Xander, do we have any other examples of businesses in town with a secondary business in the back end of the?
Yeah, there's a lot. I think the brewing company is one of the kind of first examples that comes to mind. That's
Oh.
completely in the back of the post office there. The chamber, there's offices that are often in the back. So the Chamber of Commerce office, you access directly from the parking lot at the dollar store. It's on the side there.
Sorry, Xander, I need clarification on that. So the Chamber of Commerce actually operates out of the arena now. Their previous office
Okay.
was out of the back of the dollar store.
Okay.
Last time I went there, that's where it was. And yeah, there's apartments that are accessed behind. Yeah. And the I don't want to, they're called the shacks. The adventure, those are all on private property, actually. So
Oh,
they're,
down by the wharf. You mean?
yeah, so I wouldn't say they're necessarily behind in another building, but they're another situation where you're going from a parking lot probably directly into private businesses with multiple entrances and things like that.
It's a,
Yeah, Fundy Community Foundation is the
Right.
liquor store on liquor store.
okay.
Yeah.
And are we able to ask the business proponent what their hours would be?
If they are,
They
Sure.
are on, but They are online, but get through the questions with the planner first. Then
Okay.
go to the proponent.
Yes, Mr. Tanner.
There was mentioned that there was 10 other municipalities that were licensed.
Yeah.
Could you just, out of curiosity, tell me maybe any?
Well, obviously Grand Bay Westfield, Salisbury, Shipman, Caracat, San Quentin, Shediac. I think St. Martin's. I think Hampton is I think they're in the process. Those are the ones I can, as I was doing research today, that I remember.
Anyone else for the planner? Yes.
Xander, when you mention compatibility to what's surrounding the area, what would you in your mind say the vast majority of the businesses are around there?
Well, you really, it's not exactly the area, it's uses allowed in the zone.
Okay.
So let's pull up my binder here and I'll read the list of uses allowed in the zone. And I think it's a fair representation of what is there.
It's just at the moment, we don't have in that list cannabis.
No.
store.
You do not, and that's why we're here tonight. So you could, art or craft studio, a bake shop, which seems a little specific, cultural use, excluding a theater, daycare center, financial institution, obviously there's banks, government use, so the town hall is right there, lots of hairdressers and barber shops. Not entirely sure what a health club is. Hotel is in the building. Institutional uses, laundromats. We know there's a laundromat nearby. Offices, personal service shop, printing or copying service, restaurant or dining room, retail, including pharmacy, grocery, convenience, or liquor store, bicycle sales or service shop. And that's it for allowed by right uses, but I think it's a pretty good representation of what's there.
So in other words, we're not doing any heavy industrial use.
No,
We're not doing anything of that nature.
no.
Mr. Simmons.
Yeah, sorry,
Simmons.
questions just keep popping up.
They
in
do
my head.
always,
Yeah, these are good ones though.
always. Brilliant.
Paul or Xander. I know we're switching and we're talking about compatible use. But so an example would be, Paul, say a lounge license in St. Andrews where we always attach, or the PAC or council has always attached conditions. And a lot of the time they attach conditions with a probation period. And do you remember doing those quite a few? I know,
Temporary use permit.
yeah, temporary use for like
Yeah,
1
that's
year.
not what they're
And if
applying
it
for,
doesn't,
so.
I know what it
You
is.
know.
It's permanent, but when you apply for a liquor license, we never applied for it. I've been through it lots. We applied for a liquor license and the town automatically gave me 1 year in conditions and said, come back in a year. We're going to talk to you again. I've been through it 100 times. Right. I know this is through ANBL. Not similar to, but kind of, sort of. I know you kind of know where I'm trying to go with this, but there's no way to attach it for 1 year. And if we have issues, it's too bad, right?
I mean, that would really have to come back as a temporary use application. And it's, I mean, in Grand Bay Westfield, they treat a licensed cannabis as very similar to a licensed lounge. So they're both uses subject to terms and conditions. In St. Andrews now, there's been some updates to the bylaw, and lounge licenses, you don't have to go through an amendment of the bylaw. You can, basically council can just set conditions right there. So that might be where council wants to go with this in the future, but tonight it's this similar to or compatible with use. It's not really advisable to put time conditions on those, because again, it's not really what the application is for.
Anyone? Yes, Councilor Huffman.
So what Kevin was talking about was a period of time to do a trial or,
Mhm.
but as conditions, can we set conditions for, hours of operation, days of operation?
You can, yeah, that's easier to enforce. It's not the easiest thing, but in a downtown area where there's lots of people around, it's easier. We struggle with them in some rural areas where it's like you get into like people say, well, this person was doing this thing after the hours you said they could, and there's no proof. But I think here it's a lot easier. So you can absolutely set hours for it. And I know that's typically a condition around the lounge licenses as well. One thing that council could do in the future is they could clearly prohibit the use in a bylaw, and that wouldn't stop the use immediately, but it would make it legally non-conforming and it could not expand. And if it stopped, it would basically, if it stopped for a period of 10 months, then it would actually come back to PAC for reapproval. So there would be a way for council to put some limits on it after the fact.
Because my concern is it is different than going in to the Herring and sitting down and having a beer and enjoying that in the ambiance of the Herring. It is more similar from my perspective of going into a shop and purchasing a product, which is generally shuts down at 5 o'clock in this town. Like we generally shut down businesses businesses generally shut down at 5 o'clock. So it's not an after hours kind of, it's not an after hours kind of business. It's the optics. It's in the back alley. I mean, it's the optics of it. Well, but a spa is a different experience. Yeah.
But we're talking about land use.
Right, but, well, yeah, we are talking about land use, yep. But I still see it as being different. I see it more similar than going to the Herring and having a beer. In that, as opposed to a spa, which would be come under the umbrella of wellness, right? And I think if it's going to be it's a retail store, it's not an experience, it's a retail store. And therefore a retail store generally should fall within the hours of typical operation of retail stores. From my
That the town doesn't set.
The only thing I would say to that is that if, and I could be wrong, is that this comes under A and BL. This.
Technically speaking, it comes under Cannabis New Brunswick. They are two separate entities, but they are still town corporations of the province.
So I would just be careful about hours, because the liquor store seems to mandate what they want to run as hours. They're open till 10 o'clock every night in the summer. So that, and I know that because I live beside it, so Kevin's always there at 10 p.m. But I mean, so I would just be careful that if we want to look at the hours, I don't know how much sway we have over that.
So council PAC, just so you have an idea, liquor store hours currently, as written there, Wednesdays, basically they start at 10 every day till 7 p.m. Wednesdays, Mondays, Tuesdays. Thursdays, Fridays, Saturdays, they're 10 to 9, and Sundays, depending on if they're open, 12 to 5 or closed. So just so you have an idea of what the comparative is.
But that's winter hours, just pointing that out. Summer hours are different.
That's only in St. Andrews that they're different, because I tried to come here in the summer once to get a specific type of wine and I couldn't because it wasn't open on a Sunday. Sorry. So I think my point is
Sunday they are open.
I think there would be leeway from the operator to set their own hours. I would assume so.
Sorry, there would be leeway for the operator to set their own hours, meaning they could stay open until 11 o'clock? at
Well,
night?
no, I don't think Cannabis NB would say you have to stay open this late. That's what I mean
Oh,
by
I
that.
see. Okay.
Yeah.
Any more questions for the planner at this time? Yes, Mr. Kerr?
Just around, so my biggest concern also is the traffic coming in and out between the two buildings. Is there any chance that you could put a term and condition in, limiting the traffic? Limiting the traffic to only those who work and or live in those apartments?
It's a private driveway,
Okay,
so theoretically, the owner of the driveway could do,
with it, what he wants,
yeah,
right? Okay,
yeah. And there's, I mean, just for example, there's a private driveway on the other side of that fence, and it's clearly signed. You don't want to go in there from the town parking lot. It's for these specific people. So,
right.
yeah, I think that could be a condition.
Has lighting ever been discussed? Have you looked at the location at night for lighting and walking up in there? Or,
I was there tonight. I walked
Okay,
through it.
seems to be okay?
It's,
If
I
you're
wouldn't
walking
say
in from the
it's
front street, that's
super
all.
well lit, but I think, it gets lighting from the street. It gets lighting. Is there lighting in the town parking lot, Paul? No. Okay. So it gets a little bit of lighting from the street.
Okay, so then, and then only one other thing, sorry, stuff just keeps popping up. As we had, and I know I can ask this of the applicant, I can ask it of you, and the applicant's listening, of course. Like we said, there's a blind spot when you come back out. People
Yeah.
on the right, you can see down past through Kennedy's deck and la. For thought, has the applicant or anybody maybe discussed putting a convex mirror on the pole at Kennedy that shines up the front street? So when they come down, they're looking at that, they know nobody's there.
Just
I'm-
don't think there's gonna be a ton. It's a tiny little store.
Oh. How many pot smokers are in there's? I'm just.
I mean, the bottom line, the Kennedy's been there for how many years?
100 at least.
So it's, I mean, I worked there 40 years ago. There was never any mirrors there. It was probably busier then than it is now. So, but I'd also think the amount of traffic that's on the street is different as well. I think there's a lot more foot traffic on the street.
So PAC, just so you're aware, even in the summertime when we have massive amount of traffic and trucks parked there, to PAC Simmons' point, people do crawl out of that. I've watched it personally of just
Oh, yeah.
movement of traffic and people going in and out, and they do crawl, they do stop, they do, you honestly have to because of just the flow of and movement of traffic that's there now. And plus, the Kennedy has had the sidewalk walk around there, so it has actually eliminated a lot of the front parking that's been there. If they continue that, that would also give sightlines. So
Sure.
if you want to talk within those measures, that's something you might want to look at.
I'm becoming like Kevin, lots of questions. So just to address the issue, Xander, about the slippery slope.
Mm.
This doesn't open a door, correct?
This is for this specific location.
For this specific location, for this specific application.
Yeah.
So we would have to go through this exercise just because we've approved one.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean something of a similar nature could potentially be denied.
No, I mean, it sets some kind of precedent because you're saying this is a use that's allowed in the zone, but I think it really puts an imperative on council to say, how do you want to deal with this? And I don't think the province is going to be giving out more licenses anytime soon. I can't say that for sure. But I think it's really, the municipal plan says this is up to council to regulate. And as of now, there really isn't anything to do that. So I think my recommendation really be to council is to think about how do you want to regulate this moving forward? And that will deal with any other applications that come forward. It'll provide clarity for those and not put them in the situation.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else for the planner? If not, I'm gonna hand it over to the applicant if he wishes to speak.
Mr. Jones, can you unmute? You have the floor to PAC. Yeah, I just don't know which one it's. Oh, he's that one. Okay. Mr. Jones, I've got you on the head raised.
There we go. Can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you, Mr. Jones. You have the floor. To PAC.
Perfect.
So
Is there a camera where you can see me, or is it just audio?
hold on a second. I'll move you into a panelist. Yeah, just give us a minute. Okay, Mr. Jones, you can turn on your camera and your microphone. We can see you. If you want to unmute yourself.
Yeah, we can't hear.
You can hear me now, right?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, I had to join twice just because the weather's a little bit crazy in Toronto. I just pulled over and jumped into a coffee shop to do this. So thank you. We'll get started. So everyone can hear me. Thank you all for the time tonight. I am excited to see all of you virtually. Wish I could be there in person. I wanted to start off by giving you some background information on myself. I think that will be helpful. So I've owned, this is my second chain of cannabis retail stores. So I live in Toronto. I have 14 retail stores in Ontario. Most of them are in small to medium-sized towns. So I'm used to opening up stores in towns of like the smallest town I'm in. When you drive in, it says population 86. So, very, very, very small places. My plan was, at the beginning to just open up stores in Ontario, but then I came across the application in New Brunswick last winter. It came up and I was excited just because I did want to expand out to New Brunswick. I love the province. I've always had good experiences out there. So I applied for all 10. So I know this was mentioned earlier on about how many licenses. So basically the reason why Cannabis New Brunswick started allowing private retailers to apply for licenses was for a few reasons. The first one is because the goal of, I think, generally cannabis legislation across the country is to like health and safety and to, deter the black or illegal market of cannabis sales. So that, that's number one. And then as well, a lot of people in, small communities, are buying products illegally because they don't have access to a retail store. And most of the Cannabis New Brunswick stores are in, like St. John, Moncton, just larger cities. And the stores that they're building are upwards of $1 million. So they're building very big, expensive stores. And when I go to these towns and I visit, I ask people, why they don't want to shop in the Cannabis New Brunswick stores. And the main feedback I get is that they just don't want to buy from the government store. So many reasons why, Cannabis New Brunswick started this process to allow private retailers to open, but particularly, they understand that private retailers are better suited to open up in smaller towns. The overall goal is to educate consumers, obviously, make sure that people of legal age are buying products. So I applied for all 10. So I applied for all 10 licenses I guess it was over a year ago now. And I ended up winning all 10. So it was an extremely comprehensive government application process. So, who's on the team? What does the store look like? Or do we have the financial capability to actually execute and open up these stores? What's our plan? Do we have like SOPs in place, etc.? And so I applied for all 10, I won all 10. But then what happened is there's part of their licensing or regulations is that one owner can only own 30% of the total number of stores. So Cannabis New Brunswick said to me, you have to pick three locations out of the 10, which makes sense. Like, I think if one person won all 10 stores and there was an issue, then, the whole kind of program would just disappear. So I picked 3 towns. So I picked St. Andrews, I picked Grand Bay, and the town of Hampton. So those are the 3 that I picked. I opened up the first private retail store in Grand Bay on June 14th. So we were the very first one to open up, which was, very exciting. It's, the biggest challenge I found with opening up stores in New Brunswick compared to Ontario is just the lack of real estate that's available. I think all of you who, live in St. Andrews, even, I was looking at the surf shop. So previously in St. Andrews, I was looking at trying to lease a place in the surf shop, and then that ended up, falling through. But just the lack of real estate for anything to buy or to lease is extremely limited. So that's pretty much the main challenge I've been facing when it comes to opening up stores in these towns. And I went through the same process in Hampton. I went through it in Grand Bay, where I had to speak to the planning advisory committee and different members of the town council. And some of the concerns are similar to the concerns that all of you have brought up. The first one that came up in Grand Bay was traffic. Right, traffic came up quite a bit, and I think about it as I want my relationship with the town to be like, I understand that if you approve this, then it's approved, and then you can't really make any changes afterwards, but that's not the kind of relationship that I want with the town. Like, I am completely open, and I don't want to, open up and then there's all of a sudden traffic issues, and then I just, don't care because we're open. Like, that's completely the opposite of what I want to do. I want to be a part of the community and, make sure for the most part that, number one is like safety. Like, I want to make sure that all the customers that come into the store are of legal age. Safety is extremely important. Like, I don't want people, fighting over parking spots and it being like traffic being jammed up in the town. Like, that hasn't happened in Grand Bay. And for the most part in Grand Bay, I think only about 35% of the customers that shop at the store actually drive. So most people either walk, take transit, or they are on like a bicycle or scooter. And the whole business concept, so our name, Cannabis Xpress, the whole business concept is speed and efficiency. So it's not the type of retail store where you go in and you're, hanging around for a long period of time. Like, our stores are very small. So the whole point is the customer comes in, they can ask, whatever question they want to ask to get educated about the products, and then they immediately leave. And I think, if you think about how you buy alcohol, it's a similar type of process. Like, people don't, go into the liquor store, chat with the person for an hour, buy a bottle, and like go outside and start drinking. Like, that does not happen when it comes to our cannabis products. Like, people go in, they buy the product, they put in their pocket, and then they go home. So in terms of the traffic, obviously it's a little bit tricky because it's, as mentioned, like a private driveway, but the amount of extra traffic being added, I really don't think is going to make any impact at all. Like, the people that are already driving into town will be the customers, or people will end up, walking or taking transit. And the fact that, in Grand Bay, like, I've looked at, how people actually get to the store. So the traffic is, very limited, but obviously, like, if traffic ever did come up, like, if this is an issue in the future, then we will tell every single customer to park somewhere else. Like, I have no problem with, making sure the staff tell every single customer, hey, there's, a lot of added traffic. You need to park 1 or 2 blocks away. Like, we're completely fine with that. Obviously, if it's, a customer that's a senior or someone that, has challenges, getting to the store, obviously we're not going to tell them to park far away. But for the most part, we can tell people easily that they cannot park there and they need to park somewhere else. And then the only people that are allowed in that parking lot are employees. So I don't want anyone to think that if this is approved that it's going to be like a closed door and we're not going to be able to address anything. Like, we want a good relationship with the city. So the parking stuff, we will, if it is an issue, we'll tell people to, park somewhere else. But for the most part, I think a lot of people aren't going to be driving. They're going to be the first thing that came up. The second thing is the store hours. So this is a little bit tricky because part of the application process, when I applied, the store hours, so the hours that we said we were going to be open was stored. It was a section that was stored. So you have to be, I guess we can make changes to our store hours, but for the most part, like we're not going to be open 24/7 or anything like that. Like I know in the summertime, obviously the hours will probably be extended. And then in the winter time, you know, we'll close early on. So it's more of like a supply and demand type of thing when it comes to the store hours. Like I'm not going to be open all night and see one customer. It doesn't make sense. We'd rather shut down earlier. And I think also if there is talk around limiting store hours, which I think is tricky just because the hours that I hold to Cannabis New Brunswick should be the hours that the store is open. But if we are to limit the store hours and we're talking about traffic as a concern, then that actually makes traffic worse because then more people are going to have to go during, you know, the window of time. If people work like a 9 to 5 job and the store closes at 6, then you're going to see like an influx of traffic between 5 and 6 p.m. of people trying to get to the store. So limiting the store hours, I think, could actually end up having the opposite effect of what was mentioned. And then the other point about the potential location, to be honest, the towns and the people that I've spoken to, there is no ideal location. You know, like if I applied where the scuba shop was, there would be people here tonight saying we don't want it on the main street. You know, it's very, very visible, and we don't want it on the main street. If I picked a place, and you know, like the place I'm like that's been selected, I think honestly I really do think it's the best place for where the store is going to be. Like it's at the back of the inn where people, like if you're thinking of like children and people like that walking by, like generally that's not going to happen because it's at the back of the inn. There is a very big parking lot, and I've spoken to the landlord who I believe probably I think he also is tuning in, Dominique, who's been, you know, extremely helpful in terms of saying that we can use the parking lot. Like there's a huge parking lot. I think there's like 15 spaces or something available. So, you know, the fact that we're at the back, it's, you know, it is discreet, I think is very helpful. And then obviously it's a small space. So the ideal, you know, customer comes in, makes a purchase, and then leaves. And then some of the other points, that were brought up in terms of any other stores being able to open. That's definitely going to be a no, just because, but like I know Cannabis New Brunswick could potentially allow more people to open up in town, but for the most part, they're not going to. And I think out of everyone, so Cannabis New Brunswick had an event 2 weeks ago in Moncton that I went to, and I was able to meet the other retailers, the other owners of the businesses. And we are by far the most experienced retailer out of everyone. Like a lot of people that opened up stores, it's their first retail store that they've ever opened. Like I had 4 other retail stores previously, and I currently have 14 in Ontario and 1 here. So I, like, in terms of like having procedures, policies, understanding the product, education, and just going through the licensing process so many times, we are the most experienced people to open up the store in the town. So I think that is a very important point that I want to make, because there could have been someone else who won the license who has never opened up a store before, and they don't know the regulations as well as I do. So I think that's a very important point I want to emphasize. And I guess, well, a little bit more background about me, just so everyone can know me a little bit better. So I did my undergrad in business in Toronto. I did my master's in business in Hamilton, so another school in Ontario. And then I currently teach as well. So I teach at a college in Toronto, different business classes. I'm teaching actually on Tuesday nights right now. So I've, like this business is something that, like, I love the industry. I know how difficult it is, being in such a highly regulated new industry. Like I love it. I work every single day, like all day long, just because I love the business so much. And I really, I really hope that this application gets approved tonight, because, I don't think there's going to be anyone better than us and our team to open up stores. Our manager actually, I think he's tuned in. I can't see I don't know if I can see the full participant list, but Nathan is our manager. He lives in Minto. He's the manager in New Brunswick. He's going to be the manager that oversees the store. We hired 5 people locally that live in Grand Bay to work at the store. So it's, you know, obviously good for the community, giving people jobs. And we had the most amount of applicants that we have ever had for any store happened in Grand Bay when we posted that job. So you can tell that there are a lot of people who, you know, want to get into business and are, you know, interested in learning. And obviously having other stores in the province is also valuable, just because we're able to, you know, share staff, you know, grow the team. So those things are important. And I'm pretty sure I addressed all of the comments that came up. You know, I would like to answer questions from everyone. Just, you know, I'm a completely open book. Like, I'm happy to give everyone my cell phone number, my email address. Like, Xander, who's there, knows how many times I've emailed him, and I've been working really hard for the past, you know, I think 10 months trying to find a location in St. Andrews, and I just really, you know, I really want to open up there. I was at Paddle Fest this summer. Like, I go there very, very often to the town. I just, you know, I want to be part of the community and you know, open up and provide people access to a legal product and to educate people, hire people locally. And, you know, I think it'll also be good for all the other, you know, businesses around. Cause I think, you know, if I was talking to Dominique, the landlord, about this, like, someone might come from another town, stop in the store to, you know, buy a product. And then they also look outside and they say, okay, I need to, you know, fill up my tank with gas. Maybe I'll go over there and, you know, eat lunch at the Kennedy Inn. Maybe I'll go, you know, buy something. So I think it also provides other benefits to other businesses that are in town as well. So yeah, happy to answer any questions. I apologize for all the people walking behind me. I just had there's crazy amount of traffic. It was hailing here earlier, so I had to pull over and find a spot to do this. But I'm happy to answer any questions that anyone has. And thank you for your time tonight. I know it's kind of a little bit late over there.
Wonderful. Well, thank you very much for your presentation. Does the committee have any questions for the applicant? Ms. Harlan?
Thanks, Christopher, for the presentation. It was helpful to understand a little bit about your background and about your experience in the field. So we appreciate that, or I appreciate that. I just need to go back to the hours. So you indicated that, or did I understand you to say that in your application to Cannabis NB, there were some stipulations around the hours?
Yeah, so I'll tell you what hours are right now for my Grand Bay store, because I think they'll be similar. So obviously, like, I've only had kind of the summer, and now we're going into the winter in Grand Bay. So I probably will adjust my hours for the winter. I don't think they're going to be as long as the summer. But so currently, this is my Grand Bay store. We're open from 10 a.m. to 8 p.m. Monday to Saturday. So 10 a.m. to 8 p.m. Monday to Saturday, and then Sunday 11 a.m. to 5 p.m. So those currently are hours in Grand Bay. And then obviously we'll, you know, if like sales are slow at the very end of the night or at the beginning of the day, then we'll limit them. But yeah, currently, like, under the application process, I did say that I was going to be opening up a specific amount of hours, which is a scored criteria.
Thank you.
So what we would probably do is start by mimicking those same hours. I would copy them. So 11 a.m. to 8 p.m. Monday to Saturday, and then on Sunday 11 a.m. to 5 p.m. And then if customers were coming at the end of the day, we would limit them.
Thank you very much. Anyone else have questions for the applicant? There being none? No, nobody. Okay. Pardon me. All right. Wonderful. All right. Well, now we'll take some comments from the public. We'll start within the polling area.
Just give me a second.
If there
Thank
is
you, Mr.
anyone.
Jones. I'm going to move you back to just an attendee.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
All right. I'll start in the room here. Anyone from within the polling area? If you wouldn't mind, just please identifying yourself for the minutes. Thank you.
Is it green? No, is it green?
Hmm?
There you go. There you
I think so.
Hi, James Janelle, 228 Montague Street. Prior experience from me at this stage, but I did want to come, our heritage committee meeting, canceled, so I decided to see what it's going on with this. Just want to clarify a few things, because I think I've heard a lot of numbers and things today, just sitting here, and I just want to kind of talk about a few facts. First of all, how New Brunswick rolled this out is very different than how this was rolled out in Ontario. So the New Brunswick government decided to allow for private retailing after failure of cannabis concept, let the early stages of life. So in Ontario, when they went to roll out private retailing, they gave municipalities the option to opt out. And 77 municipalities in Ontario opted out. Two of those, if anybody knows Ontario, is the town of Oakville and the town of Niagara on the Lake. So Niagara on the Lake is almost identical to Big M. 1812, Port of 1812, Oil Settlement, Town Platte, Heritage Destination. The fabric of that town is identical to Big M. And they said no to cannabis. They also have a very compact, historic main street filled with local retailers. They do a couple of changes in there as well, but a very similar main street to what is in a large street. Oakville, town of Oakville, is also home to a very famous main street in Old Oakville, and they said no to cannabis. The rules in Ontario were that you could opt out, or you could opt in. If you opted in, you could never opt out. It's kind of like, I guess, like the mafia, like you can't get out. So once you opted in Ontario as a municipality, you could not opt out. If you opted out, you had the choice of the council at any time to opt back in to allow for these methods. Yeah. So we 2 years ago moved here to Toronto, which opted in. And if anybody knows what's happened in Toronto, I can tell you, having lived through it, we had 5 cannabis retailers open within a 15-minute walk of where we live. So we had 2 major shopping areas, similar to Water Street, where we lost our barber, who was priced out of their retail space. We lost a bakery that had been there for 40 years. Several businesses. I would say, the Thai restaurant, our favorite Thai restaurant, was gone as well. And the reason for it is because there was no control. And even though the law does say that we have a couple of vendors today, it doesn't mean that the province can't tomorrow say, here's 10 more. Or here's another license for Canada. Or here's another license for St. George or wherever. I'm not against cannabis. I'm not. I'm against it being in the central business district. And the question tonight is about, is this a retail, a retail space? And the view that Niagara on the Lake, Oakville and others said, well, it's a different type of retail. It's not quite the type of retail we want in our community, and so that's where they opted out. If you look at, in one of the letters I sent you, cannabis is the most regulated thing in the country. It is more regulated actually than a casino in the country. So no one under the age of 19 can enter the cannabis retail store. They can't see inside the store. They can't see their products in the store. They can't go in with their parents. It's not a typical retail store. In fact, they can't even advertise, which a casino in New Brunswick can do, which actually makes it more regulated than a casino. So the question I'm asking for people to consider is it really a retail store if it's as regulated as highly as a casino? Because they could decide to put a casino in there. I just wanted to share those things because, you know, we moved here to get away from what was all happening from it. I won't lie, if we see this happen in St. Andrews, we'll probably go to Scotia. Mostly because you know, by Nova Scotia Liquor Corporation.
Thank you very much.
I'm Lee Wells and I own Good Haven County Country Water Street. I've invested well over $1 million into the building, over $1 million. And it's bad enough with parking. Our people, Kevin smartly said, the parking is disastrous. And it's disastrous coming out of the Kennedy. And how shall it be when you've got a grandmother that's having lunch at the Kennedy coming out with her grandchild in a stroller? And there's some kid scooting in there to buy some marijuana. And it's already a problem. On Thursdays alone, because of the market and the one-way street, it's a disaster. And it's taking away from the values of this little loyal town, all the money I've invested in this town, and the goodness I've done, and many other people in the room have done good things. It's terrible. It's one in St. Stephen, that's near the McDonald's. Next thing I'll want a McDonald's here. And with the loosey-goosey idea that it can change the hours of it and everything, what's to stop them from doing it again? We had the subway, they dealt with that. But this is a different oil wax. It's not a retail business. This is not going in to buy a pair of shoes. What if some person that is legal goes in and there's another person that's underage is waiting outside that parking lot to purchase this stuff, this marijuana? I am not opposed to marijuana by any means. I have arthritis and I use it myself. But I can make the journey somewhere else. This is too lovely of a family to let this happen. I'm totally opposed to it, and I've spent a lot of money on this and done a lot of good things. I'm totally opposed to that. I've done it. And he says, well, he chose New Brunswick. How so? Of St. Andrews. And this is not Grand, we say Grand Bay, with Grand Bay? Grand Bay is not St. Andrews. And Moncton is not St. Andrews. St. Andrews is a town, not a city. Moncton is a city, and Fredericton is a city. So you've got it there, but I just don't see it happening here. You know, with all the money that I've invested, it's just like throwing in the towel here. I don't understand it. I just don't understand it. And how it can continue and how this can get approved, it just floors me. It floors me. There's nothing, and he said about his employees sharing the employee employment with the Grand Bay. Did you not hear this? He said share the employment. That's not people that live in this community. Where do they live? Where are they going to park when they're coming here to work in those jobs? Are they going to park on the street? It's clogged up on every street, from Queen Street to other streets now. There is only one parking lot. That's the one behind the station restaurant. And the parking lot is where the Legion parks. Was it the Legion?
Yeah.
That's it. You've got street parking, people front of people's house. The next thing you know, they'll be smoking the marijuana in their car with the window open. The company's taking a baby car and going along the road of a small historic. When I just heard of this, it disturbed me terribly. Of going further with investing money into the community. I'm sorry, I've got nothing against people smoking it. I told you I smoke it because I have arthritis and it helps. But this is beyond my imagination. Does he need another shop in St. Andrews, New Brunswick? There are other communities, and then holding Grand Bay up on a pedestal to say that, well, Grand Bay is not St. Andrews. And Moncton is certainly not St. Andrews. It's a city. It's not a town. This is a town, small town. Even St. George's but St. Stephen is bigger than this. And look at the troubles they possess. And look at the troubles that are coming to this town. As we speak, every day, 48 hours, 24 hours of the day, there's a siren, something that we've got people breaking into cars, stealing cars, coming here, dropped off in buses. And regretfully so, part of it is caused from this reckless behavior of not using the product safely and having it distributed next to a small college. And small school. I find it just horrific. Last week I went to St. Stephen. As I was going along the road with my friend going to a luncheon, there were 3 kids smoking crack right in front of Carmen's thing. And you see them smoking joints on the road with children and their dogs and babies. I mean, that's all I can say about it. So I hope that you can find it in your heart to just postpone it until you get more of an opinion. These slip through things that's just not appropriate. Greed is not everything. It's terrible. Anyway, so this is awesome. Thank you.
Thank you for comments.
Thank you.
Mr. Knopper, anyone online?
So for those that are online watching tonight, if you have any comments, please raise your hand online and we'll bring you in for a conversation. Make the call again for any of those that are online watching and wish to make any comments, please raise your hand. One last call for anybody online that would wish to make any comments, please raise your hand. Madam Chair, nobody has raised their hand.
So Xander, just help me understand again. You said that council really has the responsibility, that might be the wrong word, but
Onus, maybe?
to determine whether or not we as a municipality allow for a cannabis NB or similar, like, so just to James's point, so in Ontario, they did it differently. Municipalities opted in or opted out. In New Brunswick, it wasn't structured that way. The licenses were advertised and people applied for them and purchased them. And municipalities really didn't have the opportunity to determine, particularly with amalgamation, we haven't had the opportunity yet to determine if this is something that we want in our municipality. Is that correct?
So the municipal plan was adopted in 2020. And the policy in there is council shall monitor and if deemed necessary, regulate cannabis retail operations. So I have to assume that council has been monitoring. And I know I've written reports to council that have said, you know, this is a possibility that could happen. And if it does, here's what will likely happen. Here's the course of action. Here's how it could be allowed. And to my knowledge, nothing ever came back from council saying we want to amend a bylaw to regulate this. So that's the indication I have. And I don't know, Mr. Knopper, if you've gotten any different indications from council.
Through you, Madam Chair, no, Mr. Copen has explained what's been given both to council and what the response back from council has been.
Perfect, thank you.
Are you aware of any municipalities in New Brunswick that have regulated it?
Well, Grand Bay Westfield, they have addressed it specifically in their bylaw. I think it was an amendment at the time of application. The applicant here might know more. I just know that as of today, if you want to open a cannabis retail store in Grand Bay Westfield, it's defined in the bylaw what it is. And it's an allowed use in the central commercial zone. It says cannabis retail. along with a lot of other uses that are very similar to the ones in St. Andrews Central Commercial Zone. And then it says in another section, this and licensed lounges, so they sort of treat it like alcohol and cannabis is the same, are subject to terms and conditions from PAC. So it still puts some control to PAC to say, you know, we think there needs to be a bigger buffer, or I mean, terms and conditions are fairly nebulous. They're not really steering you. It's to protect the health and safety of the community is more what terms and conditions are about, but it's saying it is an allowed use. That's the regulation I've seen on it. I would assume in the cities, it's just a retail use like any other. And you see it, you know, tends to be in our grocery stores or liquor stores. That's the extent of my knowledge of how it's been regulated.
Okay. And just one last question, I think. Just to Kevin's point around a terms and condition being a trial period, like it being 1 year to determine what the experience has been. Is that allowed?
It would be a different type of variance, and so we'd have to get a different application. And
that's not a term and condition that we can apply.
Really, no. It's I would say council can make it a legally non-conforming use, which will kind of put a sunset clause on it. But this type of application, I cannot advise making it time limited.
Thanks.
I want to make sure everyone's had an opportunity to ask all their questions, and then we'll try and get a motion on the table.
Xander, one more quick question.
Yep.
Sorry, Madam Chair. Are there any other, after this tonight, I'm assuming this will not come in front of PAC or council again, only the planning commission?
Unless they need variances on their signs, they'll have to apply for a sign permit. And sometimes those require variances. I mean, if they significantly change their plans, they do need a building permit. And that is something that there will need to be changes to the building for, based on my conversation with the building inspector. So it wouldn't be coming to PAC, but there's still another level of that is mostly dealing with life safety and fire safety. So there will be additional stuff that they have to do to meet those.
Sorry.
You just flipped on there. Did you have something to say?
Yes.
Oh, good.
In conditions, I know we said we could attach conditions to one being hours of operation, but he's kind of thrown it as our operations at us anyways. Is the fence on the neighboring property part of a condition or no? Or is that just a mutual agreement between the two property owners? Like, I'm just trying to make sure that, you know, willy-nilly, there's people going across somebody's lawn, coming in through the back parking lot, coming in through, we limit all traffic to that alleyway or that driveway or that right of way or whatever we want to call it. Instead of 20 cars parking in the town parking lot and them running in through, leaving the car running and back out. I mean, just trying to make sure that the retail location and the way you get to it would be from Water Street.
The easiest conditions to enforce are conditions that involve structures and things like that. So requiring a fence is like that is definitely a reasonable condition. I mean, it sounds like it's something they talked about already. My only concern would be what about the other property owners who are there? Is that, I know there's been some letters about it, but if there's a way to have a conversation and have that be a mutual agreement rather than a condition that then needs to be enforced.
Would it also not be a little tricky that we're applying a condition to an operator as opposed to the owner? Wouldn't that be a landowner's responsibility?
I mean, I think it's for a property. So if what would happen is if the landowner said, no, you can't do that, then they can't meet a condition and they can't move forward. So.
Mm-hmm.
So through you, Madam Chair, I think we're all in a situation right now. I think I'll speak for myself. I'm very conflicted about where I sit with this application. I know that we have a couple of options. We can either approve this, put conditions on it, deny it, table it for further discussion and for further information. But I think to table it, we need to outline what further information we actually require. We just can't say, I don't feel comfortable about this, let's table it, which I would love to do. I honestly, I would. But I mean, I don't know whether pushing it down the field is going to help at all.
Do you feel like you're missing some information specifically?
I am concerned about the parking. It seems like I don't know whether we need to have a parking study on this. The lighting is another thing. Kevin brought it up. I think lighting levels would be interesting to see what kind of lights are down through there. Whether it just means, it might just be maybe 2 packs on the wall going down, just so there's adequate lighting. Because once again, the onus will be on us to provide a customer a clear, safe passage to the retail outlet. So it needs to be clear, it needs to be safe, it needs to be in the winter times plowed and sanded, et cetera, so it needs to be regulated that way. It's going to be acting as a public right-of-way sidewalk. Is what's going to happen through there, which I would assume the owner of the business is probably doing already during operations. But I would like to see it be a little bit more safe. So I don't know. I think we're all like in a little bit of a bind here a bit, but maybe that's just me.
I guess, Madam Chair, you do have 2 hands up.
Yes, I think they probably want to address the specific items that we're discussing.
So my recommendation is to speak with the operator or the building owner first, Mr.
Yes,
Dominic Boulanger.
Mr. Boulanger, yeah.
Okay. Mr. Boulanger, if you want to unmute, you can speak to PAC.
Hi, Council. Good evening, Madam Chair. Thank you very much for allowing me to intervene. When Mr. Simmons suggested that fence was going to be built to seal off foot traffic, we have to clearly understand where that eventual fence would be put up. Carl and Jeannie have currently put up ropes, which basically goes from the CVZ up to town parking, and that's basically where a potential fence would be put up, but nothing would be connected or built against the Kennedy, for the simple reason that, first of all, it would be too close to the propane tank. Second, there's also the fire safety reason. If something would happen in that parking lot, the only escape route would be through Water Street, and that's I don't think a good idea, or at least I don't think that's even that would be even allowed. So if there would be an emergency on the Water Street side of my parking lot, then obviously people would still need to have an escape route. So just to make that clear, that any potential fence would still be detached from Kennedy House, and would still allow basically foot traffic to happen. The discussion that we had with, or at least the conversation that I had with Carl and Jeannie, was more to provide them with privacy towards their parking lot, which I understand, and even without the impact or potential impact from the Cannabis Xpress location, there is already substantial foot traffic and people walking in and out of our parking lot behind the Kennedy House today, whether that is people who want to have direct access to Water Street or take a shortcut. That alley or that back alley is being used today already, even after hours, obviously, because we can't control that. And so, you know, the neighbor's concern is mostly related to the traffic or the footfall that happens through that alley. But to clarify, any fence would not block foot traffic coming through that area. It would mostly seal it off or lower or lessen the impact for Mr. Savoy and his wife. That's my comment. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. All right. Maybe Mr. Jones.
I'm gonna actually go to Mr. Savoy first.
Oh, sure. Sorry.
Mr. Savoy, if you want to unmute, you have the floor to the PAC.
Yes, good evening. Can everyone hear me?
Yep. We sure can.
Okay, perfect. Yes, no, so we did speak to Mr. Belanger, and that is true. They would not be connected. And the reason why we also discussed that is because we wanted to say to the town as well, because we have the Jersey barriers on between the town parking lot and our space, and the foot traffic does go by there, and some people do stop and sit on the Jersey barriers either to have a cigarette, or if the town washrooms are closed, to obviously relieve themselves. And we would be requesting a fence there as well from the town, from the parking lot, the town parking lot, to our space. So that would have two fences, and then they could still have access, like Mr. Belanger said, behind as another exit, emergency exit, or a safety purpose. So it would be two fences, actually. We'd be wanting or putting a conditions on. Yeah, so if that all makes sense.
Thank you, Mr. Savoy.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Would you like to hear from the
Anyone else? Might as well.
Mr. Jones, if you'd like to unmute yourself.
Hello?
Yeah, we can hear you, Mr. Jones.
Perfect. Thanks for letting me speak again. So some of the concerns that came up, I think they're not based in actual facts with how these businesses operate. Like the concern came up about from one of the residents about like children having access. That is, like, we are strictly regulated by Cannabis New Brunswick, and we, like, that is a serious violation. That has never happened in any of my stores in Ontario. We have done tens of thousands of transactions. So selling to youth, that is something that is not happening. And I think realistically, like, people that are underage are buying products illegally right now. They're not asking a friend to go and buy a legal product from the store. They're buying these products illegally. So that, you know, like some of the stuff I'm hearing, it's common for me to hear these things, but a lot of it is based in fear versus actual fact of how these businesses operate. Like, it's a highly regulated business, and we need, like, in terms of like safety of the staff, making sure patrons don't, you know, purchase products and try and consume them outside. Like we tell them to leave. That like if that ever happens, and it's extremely rare that patrons try and consume a product outside. It's similar to buying alcohol. Someone buys a product, they take it home and they consume it at home. So the questions around safety and child use and all of those things are they're just completely not true. Even there's numerous studies, especially in more developed mature markets like Colorado, where having a legal licensed cannabis store in a town reduces crime because it's illegal drug dealers that are selling these products. So it reduces crime, and the fact that we have cameras all over the store. So like part of the regulatory process, there needs to be cameras everywhere, an alarm, the product needs to be locked up. So we are very, very regulated on that side through Cannabis New Brunswick. And some of the other points about adding safety lighting, we are 100% on board with that. If that's what is needed, we agreed we would update the logo to not have the leaf in it. The safety lighting, we are completely fine with that. Like I'm open to whatever suggestions are made to make everyone here feel comfortable, right? And I think considering only 2 people from the public came in shows that all the people that stayed at home and didn't come are either neutral or supportive of this. And I think that really hasn't been taken into consideration, because if I got a letter in the mail for a business opening up and I'm fine with it, and I read the letter and I put it in the recycling bin, I don't so I think the thousands of people that live in the town, they're either neutral or supportive of it. So having only 2 people that have come in to say that they don't want the store there, that I like meeting people like that. I really want them just to educate themselves on the business and what we do, and to even visit my store that is open in Grand Bay, because we'll see that we have highly trained, educated staff. The store is, it's nice looking on the inside. And the concerns that they brought up are simply not happening with, people like smoking weed on the street, and that literally does not happen. It's a little bit tough for me to hear. Obviously, you can tell I'm passionate about it, but I have years of experience and tens of thousands of transactions that, in many stores all across Ontario that prove these things are just not true. So if there are things added to this, like the lighting, obviously there's things that I can control, some that I can't. The landlord, Dominique, who spoke up earlier, has been, extremely helpful, and obviously he wants, the best for us and the best for his business as well. Because he's been in town for so long. So I think, if having the support of him on board with this should carry some weight, just because, if he didn't want us there, then he wouldn't have, agreed to, to lease us the space and to move forward with it. So I think that carries a lot of weight, because I'm sure all of you have, been at his inn or shopped at or had a meal or a drink at, the restaurant. So, I'm happy to address any concerns that, are added to the approval of this, like lighting, some sort of mirror, I think was mentioned. Like any of those things, I'm happy to add, just so everyone feels comfortable. But I just want to make sure that a lot of the concerns that were brought up are merely based in just a fear of the unknown versus like factually how these businesses operate. So thank you for letting me speak again.
Yes.
So to Dwight's point, this is a challenging conversation, and this isn't a conversation about our thoughts on legalized use of marijuana. So what we have to decide today is whether it's similar to or compatible with other businesses in our historic downtown area. Pardon me? The liquor store was the one that was mentioned. But the difference for me, is how highly regulated this product is. liquor is not this highly regulated. I can go in to a liquor store with my son or daughter, underage son or daughter, and purchase alcohol as long as my son or daughter is not touching it, and leave the store. And I can go in and see everything that's on the shelf. And I understand the business model, or I understand to a degree the business model of Cannabis NB, which is absolutely about education and helping people understand the product, and I've looked at some of the literature, and it's about responsible use, et cetera, et cetera. I'm not debating any of that. But I don't see this as similar to or compatible with what is currently in our historic downtown because of how regulated it is. I guess when I heard Mr. Jeannot mention a casino, I'm like, yeah, that's a highly regulated. This is more regulated than a casino. And I'm not prepared to see a casino in our historic downtown. So I guess for those reasons, I'm not supportive of this application.
We should probably get a motion on the table and start the discussions. I want everyone to be comfortable. So yes, ask a question.
Xander, I got one quick question. So say this business wanted to set up in the old time pizza. For example, it's down beside the Gables, empty
Yeah.
building. Would we be having these discussions? Would this come in front of the board?
Because it's a similar to a compatible use.
Yes, but it's not in for that building though.
One,
That's what I'm.
well,
It's
so
not
there
the
would be
same.
other challenges with that location. So one of the requirements of the secondary municipal plan is on street fronting facades, you have to have a high degree of transparency.
So
And this business cannot have any transparency. So it would have to go on a second floor or in the back of a building, I think. I can't see anything. I do want to make one point, just because the casino came up. This is actually addressed in the zoning bylaw, casinos. And they are in the tourist commercial zone. They're not an allowed use in the central commercial zone. They're an allowed use. Well, no, they actually need. They're basically something that is not allowed in town. Like it's, there's some grandfathered ones, but you couldn't open a new, without an amendment. So this is clearly saying, this is council. Council has to make this decision. That would be, any premises where the primary business operation consists of any form of gambling or gaming services.
Is anyone interested in making a motion? May I ask what happens
I
if
don't
no
know.
motion? Oh, sorry.
I don't know if it'd be a motion or a statement. Personally, myself, I take a little bit more comfort in the fact that it's regulated, is what it is. A couple weeks ago, there was a bit of an expose on CBC. It was 5-year anniversary of the legalization of marijuana. And they said when, they started the process of legalizing marijuana 5 years ago, some people thought it would be the end of our society as we know it. Others thought it was going to be an economic boon beyond all belief to rival the .com. And 5 years later, it was none of those things. That, you know, there was some uptick in the economy perhaps, but there wasn't the end of our society as we know it. But what they did say was that there was a marked decrease in the black market or the illegal sale of marijuana. So to me, as a former educator, that in itself is a bit of a win. So for those reasons, and the fact that it would add some more jobs to the economy here, and it would be, regardless of what business you opened in that building, whether it be a spa, a daycare, a bakery, or anything else, it's going to increase traffic. People are going to have to be careful coming up on the street. So for me, I would be supportive of this proposal tonight. So whether I want to make you know, how you phrase that, but you know, it sounds like we're, as a group, we're kind of on both ends of the spectrum, but I just wanted that, you know, to say that part, for that was what I thought.
Thank you.
So good luck getting emotion out of that, but
But essentially you say you're supportive of such a business. That's where it comes from.
yes, I would be, yes.
Okay.
So with a recommended motion here on our application or documentation, as well as I think it sounds like to me that we're looking at maybe a couple more additional conditions. That having been said, is that enough to urge anyone to make a motion? Absolutely.
Just so I understand this right. So we cannot have we cannot recommend Christopher to build fences. I believe it was on Mr. Savoy's property or on his property or on the landowner's property prior to opening this business.
You can definitely set a condition that a fence be built on the property that the
Landowner's property.
like where the use would be occurring. My concern with that is it seems like it's like there's still some discussion between the landlord and the neighbor and all those things about where that fence would actually go, and it seems like it's, from my understanding, it's mostly for the benefit of that neighbor. So I don't know if adding that condition would be particularly helpful. That's my concern with that. Whereas something around lighting would be much easier.
Okay. Sorry. But would not a fence reduce the amount of light pollution at night in the wintertime when traffic is going in there? Not to just that, but through to the other street as well? Or also through to the Allen Frederick?
I think you could have a condition around a fence being placed in the rear yard to block light from cars coming in. So you'd want an opaque fence. It could be to the satisfaction of both, based on an agreement between neighboring properties. So they would have to come to that agreement on what the fence would be and how it would work. And then once that agreement is there, then and we have confirmation that that's the fence that will be built, then so it's not quite setting it so that there isn't flexibility, if you know what I mean.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we could add that as a term and condition that both the business and the neighbor have to come to terms in terms of a fence. Per se, correct?
Yeah, and I would say in the rear yard, because then you're specifying between which owners. And then you're also not saying it has to go all the way to the edge of the building, which would create problems. If there was not an agreement between the property owners, then it couldn't be placed on the property line. So in my mind, that's what creates enough structure, but leaves it flexible enough that it's not something that will have to come back here for another change of that condition.
Yes.
So Xander, just to be clear in my head, so a casino could not be, there couldn't be an application for a casino in our current.
It would have to go to council. It would be
have to-
a application for an amendment to the zoning bylaw, which
Okay.
goes to council.
So I just want to clarify, I completely concur with John's comments around the fact that legalized marijuana and cannabis NB distributors has made an impact on the black market. I'm very supportive of that. I am very, very supportive of cleaning up the illegal trade of marijuana, given what our experience has been with that. I just go back to the fact that I do not see this as similar or compatible, given how regulated it is in our historic downtown. If it was somewhere else in town, I would feel very differently about it. But in our historic downtown, I don't see such a highly regulated product as being appropriate.
For myself, I don't think whether there's a cannabis store downtown or not downtown, I don't think it's gonna make a difference in the amount of use that people are gonna see. When this first came out 5 years ago, 6 years ago, we all thought at our local campground that, great, it's gonna smell like skunk everywhere. The kids, we're gonna have to tell our kids where to go and where not to go. None of that ever happened. As we also saw across and heard about across a lot of Canada, there was no difference. So I don't think there's going to be a big difference within St. Andrews in terms of people using the product or how they use it. That's all regulated, and that's not going to change. And with the regulations, how well it is regulated, I see all the different points, but I think it would work in St. Andrews, given time. My biggest concern is traffic. That's traffic and the neighbors with fencing and given the right people their distance and what neighbors would like to have in place. That's all I have to say.
Not hearing any motions. Okay.
And then even if we get it up there, it's going down. But we have to get a motion on the floor. Yeah.
Yes, and there's also more time to discuss that motion. It's just a little bit easier to know what we're talking about. Mr. Simmons,
Here we go.
let's do it.
That the Plan Advisory Committee of the Town of St. Andrews approves the application, consider retail cannabis stores similar to or compatible with the liquor store, subject to the following conditions. Before any signage is installed, a sign permit application is submitted, and that any signs are appropriate to the character of the historic business district, made of durable and traditional materials or facsimiles in the opinion of the development officer. The second condition would be that an opaque rear yard fence be installed for light pollution. My second one would be, or third one actually now would be adequate lighting to be provided for walkway. My fourth one would be reasonable hours as per application be set 11 to 8 Monday to Saturday as per the applicant, and 11 to 5 on Sunday. 4, I'm not sure if this will work, Xander, the 2 spaces be dedicated for customers of the store in the parking lot, and 5 convex mirrors be installed for safety at the entrance, or concave, whichever it is.
Okay, everybody's,
Get a seconder first, should we? Or answer the question first about parking?
you might as well get a seconder,
All right,
because you can amend it.
thank you.
Sorry.
I'll second.
Seconded by Mr. Ingles. Thank you very much. Thank you. All right, so we have a seconded motion. We have some additional conditions. We did not specify where that fencing is going to be, and I believe that we landed on based on the agreement between,
We said rear yard.
right?
He said rear yard, opaque rear yard fence.
Okay,
So
That's
I
what he
think,
said.
and I think that's actually sufficient because
okay,
if the neighbor agrees, then they can put it on the property line. If they don't, then it will have to be a meter back or they come
But it's
back
still a
for a
fence.
variance, but
Got
it's
it.
still a fence that
Fair enough.
the purpose is to block light and we can determine that.
And height can be done at the
Thanks.
time. right?
Yeah, it will have to be sufficient to block light, but
and adequate lighting. And, did we want to specify that a little better?
Oh,
the easiest way is
Safety
to the
lighting.
satisfaction of the development officer.
Okay,
You're basically leaving it up to me at that point. But it is good to have a standard or to
okay,
give it to somebody to have a standard. I looked through the zoning bylaw. The only lighting stuff is that it shouldn't shine into other businesses. So it should be downward facing lighting. And
below the height of the
We
fence, I
don't give a
guess, too.
lux, we don't give a lux or a table, it's not a number.
that's the kind of thing we'd have to like go back and determine. So that's kind of like the easy way is to the satisfaction development officer. Otherwise, I think it's not good to come up with a standard on the spot. We'll go through that in a further training, but yeah, so it could be at every certain distance. It could be
It's in your court.
I mean, if you want to put it in my court, you could make it to the satisfaction of the development officer, but that's again, you're trusting me to do that. So,
And say downlighting at appropriate location and levels.
downward facing lighting.
Light sky down.
So it'll be shielded, downward facing. Or to the satisfaction of the town, you can put it back to the town. That would probably be town staff. So we'd be talking with the CAO and I would personally feel better about that. So
right.
yeah, so maybe to the satisfaction of town staff, because then it's a bigger discussion between more people.
Okay, to town staff. Wow.
We're gonna do that again.
Whoa. I don't even know what I'm writing anymore.
We want to read
No,
the amended
okay.
motion back into the record.
The only other one was, sorry, Xander, what about the two
Oh, the
parking
parking.
spots? I know you were
Um,
gonna cringe on that one. Just
It-
that way, we always know there's adequate parking. They come in, you said they're not gonna be there very long. There's a spot, they can park, they can grab, go for those 35% of customers, elderly. We know there's a parking spot in there. They're not gonna park in front of the kitchen door and drive away, and then all of a sudden, I mean, it could happen. Turn it off now.
Yeah, it's kind of building code would determine that, and I don't think it's a big enough space to require accessible parking. It. Yeah, I personally feel like that's better left up to the business for as their decision of how to manage parking on their lot. It's not a use that would require no commercial use in that zone requires parking in the historic business district. So you can have it. I mean, it's a clear condition, but well, they would have to comply with it, but I mean, again, it's something that could be appealed. And I don't know if there will be support around the table for it. So that's, I think the question is, why would that use in particular need parking, whereas another use that wouldn't be coming here to be considered similar to or compatible, why would it need that?
Because the parking spots that are provided in that parking lot are barely enough for that hotel alone. Right? If you actually go back and count, I'd be lucky if there was 12 spots in there, maybe 15 for a 35 or 40 unit hotel.
But
I
have
mean,
you
I'm
never
just,
gone to the Savings and not been able to find a parking spot
Yeah, 'cause-
outside the store?
half the workers are there from St. Andrews. I know. Yeah,
It's just
Yeah.
a tough thing to enforce, right?
yeah. It's just the first time we're approving a use off an alleyway and not on Front Street. We've entered a whole new criteria here where everybody else is Front Street facing, Front Street parking. You have to drive in there unless you walk, like they said. Anyways, I'll just leave it alone.
It's still a great motion. Did you want to reread the cleaned up version?
No,
Oh,
cleaned up.
That's,
Well, okay. Can I just skip the first part then? The big long part? That the planning advisory and just do the conditions?
yeah.
Because that's what we're doing, right? We did the signage as a condition.
Okay.
And then number 2 would be an opaque rear yard fence back. But an opaque rear yard fence to, for light pollution at an adequate height. Number 3, would adequate lighting be provided for, in a downward facing lighting, for safety as to the satisfaction of town staff? That way it saves him. 4 would be, reasonable hours as per applicant presented, 11 to 8 Monday to Saturday, 11 to 5 Sunday. 4, 5. Okay, we're just gonna skip the parking spots, and then we'll go to, convex mirrors for safety at the entrance. You want to kill the parking spot? Okay, we're done.
So that having been reworded, wordsmith. Do you have a second experience?
yes.
All right, so we have a motion with some additional conditions as read. With a seconder. Is there any further discussion? There being none, I'm gonna call the question. All those in favor of the motion as read, please signify by saying aye.
Sorry, can you just?
Mhm.
hands up and sure.
1, 2, 3, 4. Any opposed? 1 opposed. All right, so that motion has carried. Thank you very much, everyone. We will now. move-
Madam Chair,
Yes.
we are almost at our 2-hour limit
Oh,
within
my
6
goodness.
minutes.
Oh, my.
Normally speaking under your procedural process.
Yes, we were calling it. I had no idea. It was
Yeah,
not-
so you have the opportunity if you want to table and defer the next document to the next meeting, or you can continue. It's your choice. But Mr. Gopin, how long is that?
Yeah, so when did council request views on the bylaw?
Council requested views. Yeah, it's been up for a while.
Oh, Lord, that was painful.
And so what it says for like, stuff, it's a use subject to it. And that's clearly saying it's in such a category that we're specifically naming it. And we're saying we have to go to council for it. Second, you can always go to council for that. So that's the strict this category. It's the same for strip clubs and stuff too.
Was this our November meeting then? Would there not be one next week?
No, there is one next week.
Okay.
We,
so
this,
then-
this was a special meeting called to really handle this file, but
Exa-
also
Yeah,
this other file. So the subdivision bylaw was asked for views on October 16th. So it's still within the 30-day window. So if the next meeting is November 15th. So technically speaking, it's,
I'd have to write the letter that night.
well, whatever views were
Paul would
set
have
that
to write
night, then,
The only issue is I don't know if either Alex or I can be here next week.
right.
That
Because I
would-
think
I'd have
Judy's
to
the
be
only
in
one who
Eastern
has.
Charlotte and Alex has to be in Fundy Shores.
Right.
Um,
I guess the other question is, can we ask council for another set of, no,
no, because Community Planning Act says you get
Right.
30 days and if
To
you
go.
don't give views, then your views are in favor. So
Right.
it really binds you there.
Want to allow another half an hour?
I'm fine.
I can present quickly and the other
Everybody
thing
good
is
for
this-
half an hour?
This doesn't require, you don't have to actually make any decisions on this.
Your
You just have to
views.
Give our
You
views,
can
that's
go
right.
around and talk.
I'm the one that gets the homework, so.
So Dwight, the other thing was, there was Paul on the last one, there was 45 letters sent out, polling letters, right?
So for that topic that was just discussed, there were 45 polling letters.
And you have 3 that you got back.
So in the actual, from the polling area, 3, yes.
Thank you.
In
Okay.
total, I think there was
I didn't
7,
care.
so.
That means the majority, like 3 out of 45 answered. Right?
So did we want to carry on?
Yeah.
Chose to answer, yeah.
I think
What's the pleasure of
Oh.
the committee here? Another few minutes?
Yeah, let's just.
Spend a half an hour, just do it.
I'll put it in the minutes. I did not say that.
Oh, for a chance.
I will ensure Councillor Harlan that it's not you that wants to
Page
continue.
out of Councillor Harlan's book, we are gonna keep going. All right, so that having been said, we are going to now hear our reference number PAC 231106. This is a request from council to obtain the PAC's views on a proposed bylaw number 2305 for subdivisions. And at this time, we'll go right back to Mr. Gopal.
All right.
It'll be.
So I will try and go as quickly as possible. this is more Alex's work than mine, so he's obviously more familiar with it, but I'm pretty up to speed, and sometimes you get the benefit of someone looking at your work and being like, I don't understand a lot of what this is, which actually happened with this. So I think we figured out some things today that will make it a lot clearer. But just a little bit of background. So there's in 1980, the provincial subdivision regulation came into play. That's still the regulation in effect for Shamcook and Bayside. In 1984, the subdivision bylaw number 69 came in for the town. So both of those documents are quite old, over 40, well, pretty much 40 years. And somehow the municipal one we've managed to keep limping along with it, despite some issues with it, which I'll get to in a second. 2020, new municipal plan adopted. 2023, local government reform, and you've got a new town. And that has basically necessitated a new subdivision bylaw. So the current one cites the DTI 1976 Department of Transportation standards. And that actually doesn't allow land for public purposes. So you can't do any land for public purposes outside of the actual old town at this point, which means if you had a large subdivision just on the other side, the municipality could not get any land for public purposes from it because it's still under that old. So, in town, you get 8%, you get maybe a new park, maybe you get some cash in lieu. Town line out, you can't do that at this point. So there's a new guide standards that DTI has. This may be a secret. Planners and engineers don't get along super well. And engineers tend to have the idea that the wider your road is, the safer it is. And planners like, lively streets and using traffic calming measures. Highways should still be wide. Highways, you want people to go as fast as possible. But for a while now, we've been saying, well, how do you get subdivisions that better meet the needs of the community moving forward? Maybe in town with narrower streets, you don't necessarily need a 20-meter wide right-of-way with, I think it's like 10 meters of traveled surface. That's quite a bit wider than any car needs. And wider than fire trucks need. So this new subdivision bylaw but the goal is to have standards that really work for the town, the rural areas, and line up with the municipal plan and the transportation master plan, which the municipal plan has regard for. So the land for public purposes would come into effect everywhere. It gives some new options for that and points to certain directions. So trails and connectivity for recreation. It promotes green infrastructure for drainage and other, move away from engineered solutions to more climate friendly solutions that you won't get as much runoff because you have less pavement. Thinking more about a variety of road users, not just cars. There might be some streets that really it's just going to be for cars, but for new streets, especially in residential or more neighborhoods, you don't necessarily want just cars moving through as quickly as possible. You want places where people can, ride bikes and walk and stop and have conversations. And then aesthetics too. So tree lined streets and things like that to make these more attractive developments. So again, this is really based on the municipal plans and transportation master plan. It's about sustainability, healthy and safe infrastructure. It gives a lot more options. It's less of a one size fits all document. It's more if you have this situation, then you're going to this standard. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. It does get way more into climate change. It deals with green infrastructure, as I said before. And it also complies with the statements of public interest, which I mentioned earlier. So some of those are promoting a range of transportation options, including public, regional, and active transportation. Consider how the siting and design of infrastructure can improve air quality and energy conservation and efficiency, minimize the health and public safety impacts of climate change, and increase climate resiliency. Promote the use of green infrastructure, including climate resilient lands. Green infrastructure means natural assets, including forests and climate resilient lands, enhanced assets, including urban trees and bioswales, and engineered assets, including permeable pavements and green roofs. So less concrete, more green. And with respect to development that occurs in a community with existing or planned public infrastructure and services, promote development in those locations where they are, where they're planned to be. So again, this is what the province is saying has to be basically in a new subdivision bylaw and any other bylaws. So if we go to the next slide. So this is more about how do you fit in? And this is where it gets confusing because there's letters and numbers. And my brain was like, well, they should go together. So class A should relate to standard A and class B should relate to standard B, but that's not how Alex did it. So I'll talk about changes to make it clearer. This is why you want two planners, not just one. But it has, so it looks at different types of streets. So arterial and local collector, those are provincial categories. So they're kind of saying this is what it is. Although the transportation master plan has some recommendations for reclassifying certain streets in the town plat. This looks at one of the changes is looking at how the existing infrastructure is laid out. Is do you have access to an underground storm sewer, or do you just have ditching along the road? Because it would add significant expense if you said, well, even though you just have ditching along the road, you still have to put an underground storm sewers and then connect them with the ditch. It wouldn't make much sense. But they correspond to different types of subdivisions. So there haven't been a ton of subdivisions in town recently, but the one on Victoria Terrace, because that was a private road, they were able to go narrower. It's basically a driveway. But if that was going to be a public street and actually the public street, Adeline Lane, that's a really wide cul-de-sac.
So PAC Adeline Lane is part of the new Van Horn Garden Homes development on Bar Road. Yeah.
So because that's a public street, it had to be 20-meter wide right of way with that much traveled surface, and it's for a cul-de-sac that, you know, nobody's driving through that. Like you're driving and you're stopping, and the town has to maintain that. The town has to pay for paving and plowing and maintenance. So one of the reasons why this is in the statements of public interest, they refer back to long-term sustainability for municipalities. And they also, the province thinks about their own long-term sustainability, and the further out and the bigger and the more sprawling you get, the more just everything costs. So compact development in every way from the street to density, that's kind of what the settlement patterns are about. And I think the chart will make a little bit more sense on the next slides where I show some examples. But what's important to know, so they're still outside of town, or sorry, the old town, those are all still DTI streets or roads. So they're maintained and owned by the Department of Transportation. Like everybody's expecting them to get turned over to municipalities at some point in the future, but until then, everything has to go through DTI. So a lot of the newer, more innovative things will probably still only be happening in the old town. But there may be some options for the other areas if it's a private access. Yeah.
Do something. So I'm thinking, you know, you see some of the more innovative. I know we had this long discussion last night. So if it's a DTI road, we still can request to the province
Paul might know more about that than I do.
So through you, Madam Chair, the biggest thing that DTI is going to be a part of is accesses to their roadways. So for instance, let's say somebody wanted to build a subdivision out in Shamcook that had some new roadways interior.
Right.
DTI is more concerned about how is that road width, length, how is that connecting to the road? That to the arterial road or to the local collector versus more of the interior, but also DTI, because depending if it's going to become a public road out there, DTI might still set additional standards or, have to, because they're going to have to plow and maintain them if they're public roads. If they become public unassumed roads, like we've had discussions about recently, that becomes a different story because they're not necessarily maintained by the province, but still owned within that. So it's still gray as to how this is actually going to function with DTI and how this is going to roll out. But by establishing new standards and new processes, they have to adapt within that context as well.
Yeah. And it's not exactly, people were hoping that the statements of public interest would actually apply to all departments, basically, like even DTI would have to follow them, but it doesn't seem like that's going to be the case. Yep. So if we go to the next slide, it'll actually show an example of the standards. And so standard A1 should really be called the general standard because it applies to all in-town or old municipal boundary subdivisions. And this is also really puts a lot of responsibility on the municipal engineer and their team, and making sure that road bases are constructed to standards. Just because we think road widths are excessive in DTI manuals, it doesn't mean that they don't understand how to construct roads so they are maintainable over the long term and are sloped right and all that stuff. So we do like engineers for doing that work and all that math, because all that math, I don't like math. Yeah. So then after the general standards, and there's stuff for fire department, and how the municipal subdivision agreements will work. So that part is still fairly similar to existing subdivision bylaws. But we get into these different types of categories. And I think probably the diagrams at the bottom, I mean, you can read all the text, but they're basically shown in the street mix sections. So different types of streets for different purposes and different classes of user. I don't think I'll go through all of them specifically because they're yeah.
Is the 8% an increase in public use?
No, that's the same. That's identical.
3 before. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, yeah, there's basically, you've got 6 different standards, depending on the type of street. You've got local collectors, which are kind of the busiest streets within a municipality. So that's like your, I don't know how many new streets like this there will be, but that would be like your, maybe Par, Harriet.
Like Reed Street here.
Yep.
Sorry, Reed Street here. You've got sidewalks, you've got buffer zones, you've got trees, you've got. That's probably one of the best examples you have of that.
Yeah.
Standard.
Yeah, and really, when you think about that street, its job is to bring people from out of town into town. There's still sidewalk, which is nice, but it is more for cars, and it's
But
you
it's
look.
also commercial. You look at it.
Yep. Yep. And you do get commercial uses along collector streets, but they're going to be more auto oriented, less pedestrian oriented. When everything along here has a big parking lot and kind of made for cars. Don't get me started on King Street and St. Stephen. So then you've got the local streets are going to be more of your interior, and so that's like kind of your standard town plat. And you do, because it's an older grid, you do have some streets that are narrower already. There's basically this is dependent on above ground or underground infrastructure. So B1 would be if you have access to underground infrastructure, and B2 would be if you don't. So you need a little bit more of a right of way when you have above ground lighting and power lines, and you need ditches instead of a buried sewer system. And then B3 is for laneways. A little hard to imagine subdivisions that would lead to this type of use, but they do happen in other places, and it has been part of this discussion around Cannabis Express, like what happens with laneways as they get developed.
Their prime example is actually Church Lane.
Yes.
It would definitely, yes. Now, are you going to have? Yep,
Mhm.
it's a little hard to imagine a subdivision creating a situation like that. It's not impossible. You know, there's the residential growth area that will take some time to be serviced and unlocked out kind of along the Bar Road. A lot of town-owned land there. If you have more of like master planned developments, you would have a variety of different street types in there, and you might have some local laneways. You might try and get some, you know, small scale commercial in there, convenience stores, things like that. I was in Edmonton not too long ago, and they just kind of like popped down these huge master plan communities. But they have all these different types of configurations within them. And I was impressed with that. The vinyl everywhere I was a little less impressed with, but they definitely thought about how are people getting around, and there was lots of different options. So that was cool, and good stormwater management as well. And then the last one is really these I think are for private access. Or these are going to be your out of town subdivisions.
Are you talking C1?
Yeah, C1 and C2.
So
More rural.
PAC, just to give you an idea, like even C2, we've got a couple of them along like our waterfront where we have infrastructure that would run behind people's properties. So sort of acts like a laneway access easement. So that's sort of how that would fit more with, if you're looking at the context within the town, that's sort of how that's.
Give an example.
Like around Patrick Street, like down at the end, as if you're going along between the streets.
Maybe like O'Neill Farm Road.
O'Neill Farm Road.
Yeah.
That's a good example of it.
Yeah. Because what it says here is rural settlement zones where convenience of subdivision access to adjoining properties is not necessary, such as on a peninsula. Yeah. And you can imagine some of those as you start getting out of town a little bit too. I don't know about like not Stone Ridge Estates. Yeah. St. Croix, River Homes, the merchants. Yeah.
Sorry, Glass Shore is another example.
And then the last one is really for more like you're going in like up towards Shamcook Mountain or Lake or something. So it's gonna be, you're actually limiting subdivisions there because you want to leave, maybe not around Shamcook because there's more cottages. There are some more like interior areas where, again, if you look at those statements of public interest, the province is saying like really should limit development there and leave it for resource like agriculture and other types of resource development, forestry. And you don't want sprawl in there. So there would be much more limitations on the subdivision for that one. So that's C2 as it is now. And those would, I'm pretty sure those would all be private access subdivisions. And then there's a little chart of how everything works. So there's a lot of coordination with either the municipal engineer in where there are services, or DTI, or maybe eventually the municipal engineer where there aren't services. There's a lot of back and forth, and we're actually, it's still something that council would have to approve. I think PAC has given views on Stone Ridge.
PAC did provide views on the rezoning of Stonewall Place.
Stonewall, yeah, Stone Ridge.
So
Stonewall.
that's Chris Evans' property across from Bar Road.
Yeah. So we're in discussions with them around the subdivision agreement. Even if this isn't the standard yet, they see it as being beneficial to their development, and we see it as being better for the town. So we're trying to use this, and they would probably fit into, because they wouldn't have access to a lot of underground services. That would be which one is it here? I think it would actually be A2. B2, where sorry, yeah, B2, you're right. It's a local street class B. And there's even some potential for trail connections with that one, with hydro lines and some other stuff. So we're trying to work that into the subdivision agreement. And as we're doing that, we're like, oh, we need to make sure that there's ones for above ground and underground utilities. So some of the changes that are needed still, there's some of the title changes. So A1 becomes general standards. A2 then becomes A1, Class A becomes Class 1, Class B becomes Class 2. Everything makes more sense. B1 specifies that this is for underground utilities, and B2 is that this is for above ground utilities. So I know I've gone through this fairly quickly. It is a more in-depth document than the current subdivision bylaw. Yeah. But it's really trying to respond to the municipal plan, the transportation master plan, and the statements of public interest, and really I'm really happy to say that those would all be planning best practices, and I think would really lead to better subdivisions in the community.
Yeah, and helpful with amalgamation as well. I think just everyone working under the same document, I think, is going to be great.
Yeah, and we do want to, there's that amalgamation. We also, these are basically similar to we just introduced these for St. Stephen. And one thing that we think will be beneficial for development around the region is to have some common standards. And it's not going to be for everything. Like, there are certain parts of St. Andrews that, the town plat is completely unique. And there are things that are completely unique and will never be the same. But for developers, not having to learn different rules for every single community, and having consistency is a nice thing that will make more people want to develop in our region, I think. That's all I've got.
Oh.
Where was this adopted from? Where was there a template that you?
That's a better question for Alex than me, but I really think, knowing how he works, I'm not aware of a template, and that would be a good question for him. But I think he really looked at the transportation master plan. He looked at the municipal plan. Some of this stuff comes from the Netherlands. Like, once you get into the local laneways and these ideas of, like, you shouldn't actually even have a bike lane. You should just have traffic calming so that you just don't have this hierarchy of users in the same way. There are certain places I've been, and even in the downtown here in the summer, it's not quite to this point, but you can just walk in the street in certain places, and you have to go back in time and imagine before there were, like, widespread automobiles, and streets were just like, you had some horses, you had streetcars, you had a lot of people walking, people on those big penny farthing bikes. But you had, like, street life, like, so there's some of it comes from that. And then when you get into the some of the more single use things, they're really best practices. There's a group called Strong Towns that it was started by an engineer who wrote a book called Confessions of a Recovering Engineer, because he worked for municipalities and he told them put in all these big wide streets. And then he realized like, oh, it's actually causing all these problems, and it's actually not fiscally sustainable, and people are driving way too fast. And so he sort of aligned with a lot of again, I think it's more European concepts. But then for some of the more rural areas, I think you're still looking at things that are not that different from what we have currently. So that's the best answer I can give to that question.
Oh,
Sorry,
okay.
I was just gonna say, I like the fact that, you're talking about active transportation, green infrastructure. I think also we should be looking at urban forestry a bit more as well. These are a lot of ideas that maybe are a little bit foreign here, but even when I walk out or drive through, because nobody walks out through the subdivision out here, it's not very inviting to walk because there's not a safe area along the side of the road. And I look at that and I think that was only put together like 20 years ago. That should have been the first thing. Sidewalks, separated sidewalks, not a strip of pavement or a white line and then some pavement on the side. It should be separate. It should be safe. You should feel you have some place and meaning walking through here. I know in town you can't do that because it's an older town plat. That's the charm of it. I think one thing we could probably do collectively out in the town, and I'm not sure what the speed limit is in town now, whether it's dropped to 40.
Yeah.
No.
On the go.
So through PAC council, we'll be looking at the motor vehicle bylaw coming up probably in January, just based on our timeline and process. One thing else to consider, understanding build outs and everything like that, is what is the cost to the municipality in maintaining the infrastructure? So
Maintaining.
infrastructure.
Oh,
So for instance, sidewalks. Well,
Yeah.
I'll bring that as a prime example. There have been a lot of calls for sidewalks on Champlain and in the subdivision. Council has to weigh what's the cost of installation, but then also what's the cost of maintaining it, right? And that's where a balance has to be struck between what's being presented in the subdivision and what's feasible for councils to implement. So just giving that as a
Trust me, I worked as a streetscape coordinator in Markham, and it was always a fight to get the money for it. A lot of times it's just saying, just get like a wider blade for the snow
Wow.
removal.
Yeah.
Something like if you want to have a wider sidewalk, a wider blade. It's not things that you're not reinventing the wheel. It's something that can be done easily. It's just, you do get a lot of pushback though, for sure. But it's good to see this information. It's good to see this language, and I think we should really be supporting it, embracing it a lot more. The one thing I will add that really angers me still, that we still keep making private roads within the town, which we shouldn't be doing whatsoever. And we still are making a lot of cul-de-sacs. We're not making good grid networks within the town, whether it's a new subdivision or whatnot. We need to start making those connections, because active transportation is about making connections and going through. You just can't go in and go around and come back out. You want to start going to places, and we need to start looking at that a bit more careful. And I know that's a lot of master planning. I mean, when you get a master plan, it's good.
Takes a lot of that into consideration. And actually we've the current subdivision bylaw, it sort of gives a little bit of discretion around that. But we have pushed like the stone, I'm gonna call it Stonewall again. It's not Stonewall, Stone Ridge.
No, Stonewall's
It is
correct.
Stonewall?
Yeah.
Okay. Weird name.
He's stonewalling.
Yeah. They were initially going to put it in a cul-de-sac. We said, no, you need to have connections for future streets. Like, that's super important, or at least trails. So I think this is definitely moving in that direction.
Yeah.
And it's the first comprehensive piece of work that speaks to the amalgamation, which warms my heart.
Just getting started.
So just
Nope, never mind. Do it after.
So.
All right, I've got just a few comments that I've heard as we've been talking around the table. Happy to see the language regarding active transportation and working towards that is a good thing. Happy to see less reliance on private roads. And this document is a comprehensive look at the bylaw in association with amalgamation. Have I covered, or did I get anything wrong?
Adding green infrastructure.
Adding green, is that part of it, or is that
Yep.
what you're
No,
recommending?
they have green infrastructure in here, which we need
Okay.
to.
And green, and what are you calling it? Green infrastructure?
Yeah, biospheres.
Yep.
Yeah, that's.
It's in
I agree
bioswales,
with
it's in
that.
here.
That's good.
Malaria claims.
Yeah, I like the template. I like the look of it. It's easy to
I-
read. It's visual. It's very well done, I think.
I honestly, Alex comes up with a lot of stuff and I come here and present it, but he thinks about stuff all the time and how to make these more user friendly. And
Yeah.
the zoning bylaw, I mean, it's gonna be a while before we actually get there, but I'm really excited to move in more of this direction, like
Yeah.
visual and
Yeah,
diagrammatic. Yeah,
yes,
that's
absolutely. Yeah.
Jay, for new zoning bylaw. Yeah, we'll be ready by then. The
Sure.
background study has started, doing lots of mapping. But I'll start probably doing some stakeholder interviews maybe by the end of the year, and hopefully getting back the actual background study to council and the public in the new year, early in the new year. It's my big project right now. So
Very good. Any other comments to be added to the letter, or does this pretty much summarize our thoughts? All right. All right, well then I should probably get
I need a
my
motion.
the motion on the table to accept these views.
Yeah, I'll make a motion that the planning advisory committee for the town of St. Andrews provide the following views in the proposed bylaw number 23-05 subdivision bylaw.
Perfect. And then those views, as I say, would be happy to see language regarding active transportation and green infrastructure. Happy to see less reliance on private roads. Comprehensive look at the at the bylaw in association with amalgamation. Is there a seconder? Excellent. Any further discussion? Didn't think so. Call the question. All those in favor of providing these views to council, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Excellent. Thank you very much. I will do that tomorrow, probably. So tonight we've got no more variance applications, no terms and conditions or sign applications. No new businesses on the agenda. Any PAC member comments that we haven't already covered tonight? We have no.
I would just say that, I think tonight was a challenging, it was a challenging night in terms of discussion. I really appreciate being part of a committee that entered into this discussion with such thoughtfulness and considering all the points. So I really appreciate being part of the PAC.
I'm gonna second that. It was tough pulling a motion out of everyone, but we worked through it. We stuck through it. I'm really happy. I'm really grateful to you guys for sticking with it. It was, like Annette said, a very challenging application. So we're ready for the next real big challenge. Look how we did this. You were very right to say that. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, I need a lighting study.
Yeah.
Just sitting on the fence.
Yeah.
So
This goes back to council.
No, we've approved it.
No, so,
Yeah.
yeah. So now it's in there will be a letter from myself to the planners and the applicant stating what PAC has done. And from there, they'll start moving through the next phases of working with the building inspectors, going through that.
That's a challenge. They definitely have a challenge there.
Oh, really?
I mean, it's,
But what will go, what.
Fire marshal.
how does council want to regulate this moving forward?
And it's appropriate when you review the municipal plan and the zoning bylaw, that would be the most appropriate time for council to, and that's coming forward. So like, we know as Xander said, it's the zoning bylaw is coming forward. The municipal plan's gonna come forward because we have to integrate Bayside Shamcook. But when you open up the document, you're opening up the whole thing. You will review top to bottom. And PAC gets view to obtain views on it, just like you did with this bylaw. PAC will be able to provide views on the municipal plan, zoning bylaw. Not sure if we're opening the secondary municipal plan, but I don't think so. Yeah, we should. So like any of those bylaws will come back to this table for your views.
Oh, that's good. Anything else? All right, everyone, here we go, 9:35. This meeting is adjourned. Thank you.